Welcome to Learning Insights by AllCloud. This is our platform where we are reeling our thoughts on the lending industry. And today is a very special podcast, a full house, of course, in collaboration with IDfy. We have our three distinguished guests who will be throwing a lot of nuggets of knowledge, light on the MSME sector, the MSME lending sector in toto. So now guys, let's dive into it. I would like to introduce our guest today. We've got Wriju, Chief Business Officer, IDfy. We've got Ajit Menon, Group Head Operations of Vivriti Capital. And we've got Sounak from TransUnion SSPL. So quite a full house, a very diverse, a very diverse forum here that will be discussing various aspects of MSME lending. And you also mentioned relationship while you're speaking about how the data model. So I'd like to pick your mind on how relationships work along with this data. Yes.
So I think one way to drive up stickiness, this is primarily a relationship business. So you are not necessarily having a relationship with the customer through the business channel. You have somebody from risk, you have somebody from operations, you have somebody from credit, and the founder himself would have face time with the borrower, maybe once every quarter. Okay, right. The ops team would have a higher frequency of being in touch with the customer. So there is an ops risk model that my team developed, which enables you to corroborate why certain covenants or why certain compliances have to be met. If they're not, then they fall into the next category of risk, and then there is a rating. And then so you could have a customer who's paying you on time, but he may not be essentially giving you the book debts on time. Does that make him a good or a bad borrower? Is a question that you need to take. So just because he's paying you on time, compliance is also, the comfort that you take on a customer is also a lot of data that he or she provides on the company. A lot of these things have to be voluntarily given by the borrower to the lender. So if I need to ascertain end use, I need to know the book debts, especially in financial services lending. Or I need stock statements essentially in non-FS lending, right? So that it's a complete cycle. And then you take a comfort on a customer, and then there is a risk gradation happens, and then risk says, okay, the risk propensity, the propensity to pay, default, etc., changes every month basis the risk score. So this cannot be straitjacket. This has to be bespoke. And until you go deep and you become bespoke is the only way you can get out of this.
You have to reiterate again and again.
Again and again. The models evolve because you're taking on new sectors. Regulations can change. So it's like it's designed experiments. You can't change all variables at the same time, right? But that's how it is. That's how it is. Many variables get changed. For example, the regulator changed the digital lending guidelines. So you have to be compliant with that, right? And you have to be compliant, almost a few days. Definitely. And at war footing. So that essentially would mean that the entire wheel had to stop, where you could lend to certain partners and you would not co-lend with certain partners because they had to be compliant because the regulator wanted you to be. And then there is this whole idea on securitization and what is synthetic securitization, why is it not allowed, etc. For example, somebody could give you an FLDG, somebody who doesn't have a book, for example, is not allowed, right? How would you give an FLDG to someone when you don't have a book? How will you absorb that risk if something were to go bad? So there is a systemic risk that was getting developed in the absence or in the light of the regulations not being very clear, especially in the retail lending space, where two NBFCs decide to co-lend together, right? So these are some of the emerging. So it's like a game that you have got to play every day.
Dynamic. I had a very interesting example on this one, if I may. Sorry, I know you're going next. Sorry, I just thought it was pertinent to mention. So there is an example of Unilever. We work with them quite closely, and they've used us to sort of map out all the Kirana stores. As you're aware, for Unilever, the Kirana stores actually are the main customers. They buy the shampoos and other products they sell, right? And they realized that they would have better business as Unilever if their customers could buy more products, which basically meant lending to Kiranas again. And so the effort began to make sure that these data sources were becoming more and more available to these shops, right? And you're from a background of supply chain, so the relationship here with the entity, here the FMCG and the Kirana store plays a very pivotal role,
Very symbiotic.
right? And the data that flows through this relationship,
And it can't be a more truer data because it's directly from the source.
It's cash flow based lending. Right? I'm able to see an invoice which is going to get paid out the next 10 days, 20 days. I'm accelerating the payment for those many days at a consideration, which is what invoice discounting is all about.
Right. Yeah. You've got a solid anchor.
Yeah, you got a solid anchor too. Yeah.
How much of this data that you collect is from the traditional structured sources, and how much it is from the non-traditional or alternative data? Because I'm going to be picking up Shaunak's mind on the alternative data. I just want you to set the context on how much of this data is actually those kinds of data set that need to be analyzed and are not given as a report or a format.
Right. So nothing really has changed in underwriting. The good old methods of underwriting, an asset remains. So broadly, you would look at balance sheet, you would look at cash flows, ratios, any amount of equity injection that's going to happen, debt that they're going to raise, right? The need for the money. Why are they coming to me for debt? Are they going to access other lines? Do they have existing lines they're accessing? What is the percentage of utilization they would have if they were to come to me? Are they going to draw this down? Are there any significant changes to the management that's going to take place in the next 2 to 3 years? Because that's exactly important for me, as a lender.
Or there has been a change in.
Or there has been a change. What's the background of the lender? So of course, you look at traditional data sets by looking at the balance sheet, financial performance, etc. That's the plain vanilla, underwriting you do. But you also take a call sectorally. You also take a call. What's the market share? What's their vision? That's essentially important for you to meet the founders and look at the conviction in the eyes. If you don't necessarily see that, it's also a gut. So, there may not be a science to it, but of course it's largely science and less of an art. Then over a period of time becomes an art. So that's exactly, so sweet spot is something you've got to hit. And then you look at alternate data sets too, right? So easy been defaulting on APFO, on the PFA, right?
If you're not paying his employees on time.
Absolutely. Right? Or is it that you're, a lot of factors, right? So these are proxies to basically tell you that what's the propensity of somebody defaulting or no. And if the proxies, if the red lines go up or the red flags go up, then there are other parameters. Of course, it's going to be a push and pull. The business guys always would want to disperse. The risk guys. So I think the best solutions come out when the risk and the credit guys
Work together.
The risk and credit, in my view, are two sides of the same coin. The business guy is definitely the party which wants the transaction to take place. The risk guy would always not want to disperse. The credit guy would always, say that these are the inherent risks, and this is if we have to, we've got to lend at these rates. Now, the expert team of decision is done by the credit committee, who would need to weigh the pros and cons and ring fence risk. The risk would then say that if there is a call, it's an institutional call to go and lend, you would want to then take a informed call. You've got to take calculated bets, because without risk there is no return. Right?
Price it right.
You have to price it right. You've got to ensure that there is adequate cash collateral by way of a security deposit, etc. You would also want to take an additional collateral by way of mobile immobile assets. You could have share pledges, etc. So there are various ways of the security package has to be carefully designed to ensure that there's a lot of money at play, and then you've got to get that money at the end. So there are ways to ring fence, but then it's an agglomeration of standard data and bureau data. Your traditional finance, your traditional way
And non-traditional.
and non-traditional data.
I think what you're trying to say is there's some data that is visible on the core of it, and there is some data that is invisible or has to be fetched.
Especially factory visits, for example. A lot of these things are not necessarily on paper, but you could uncover a lot of things when you actually go to a factory.
Yeah. So that's what I think what we've also done is to take the traditional data, take the alternative data, and then there is this visit data.
Yeah.
Because papers could say something.
And you've got to, it's got to align.
Yeah.
You've got to have at least so much congruence. It can't be like this.
Correct.
Right?
All the layers
it
come
won't be
together.
like this, but it should be like this.
Some similarity.
Yeah. So there should be some symmetry.
Yes.
It can't be completely asymmetrical.
Correct. And that's where I think if it is too much asymmetrical, you know there's something not right.
Something's not gone right. That's the reason, the asymmetry is showing.
Is showing.